So, I originally wanted to get this review out a few days after Unworthy's initial release, but I kinda ended up spending most of my time during the last 4 months by getting drunk, smoking weed, or taking depression naps. Living the dream, baby! Anyways, Souls-like is a term that's been thrown around a lot over the last couple of years, and it seems like game developers strive to be the next Dark Souls of whatever. Unworthy too seems to try really hard to be as Dark Soulsy as possible. That alone doesn't make a game good though, so let's take a look at the Dark Souls of Metroidvanias and figure out if it's any fun or just another bad attempt at cashing in on Dark Souls' hard-earned fame. Unworthy is a combat-focused Metroidvania developed by a single person. Alexander Kuzmanovich worked on this game over the course of 3 long years. I had been following the development for quite a while already, so I obviously had to get the game immediately at launch. I hopped right into it, and it quickly got obvious that Unworthy draws a lot of inspiration from Dark Souls. The combat, dialogue, and general feel of the game is very reminiscent of the Souls series, and as long as you know a teeny tiny bit about it, you'll definitely see the similarities. Ah shit, I died. Now I gotta go and recollect all my souls. I mean sins. Oh no, I used all my soul flame essence. Now I gotta go and rest at a bonfire, kiln, to replenish them. I think you get the idea. Over the years, a lot of games tried to recreate the magic of Dark Souls, but not many succeeded. And even if they did, it didn't necessarily mean that they were good games. Alex even said himself that people who don't like Dark Souls are not his target audience, since he basically tried to create 2D Dark Souls. Now that is obviously quite the statement, so I have to admit that the more I read about the game, the more skeptical I got. Unworthy absolutely nailed the difficulty though, so, there's that at least. The boss fights are a real challenge. You have to be extremely careful not to mess up or get too greedy, because if you do, you will get punished. The battles don't actually feel unfair though, and you feel like it's your own fault whenever you die. For the most part, that is. Like, this guy, on the 3rd phase before it got patched, this motherfucker was just plain evil. So how does the game actually play? Well, you roll around and you hit stuff, so it's basically like Dark Souls. Alright, sure, it's a bit different, but it feels pretty satisfying. It's neat to figure out how to deal with different enemies, and you can definitely tell that fighting gets easier the more practice you get. Just like in Dark Souls. Throughout the game, you unlock different weapons with different abilities that all come in quite handy depending on the situation you're in. I mainly found myself using the sword and shield though, since its ability to completely negate the damage of one hit seems extremely overpowered and just a lot better than all the alternatives. Something I should probably mention is, even though the gameplay was fun for the most part, there were certain areas in the game that I personally thought were kinda tedious. That's just my opinion though. Next up are the aesthetics. I personally really like the art style of Unworthy. The different shades of grey with the occasional red blood splatter sprinkled in give the game a very grim and edgy look, and I love a good edge. I was worried at first that it would be hard to tell the player character apart from the enemies when there's a lot going on screen, but I never really had that problem when actually playing the game myself. The soundtrack is pretty rad as well. It kinda stays in the background when you're just fighting regular enemies, but the music really picks up when you're battling bosses, and it makes the fights feel even more epic than they already are. Now, I mentioned a lot of things Unworthy does right, but that doesn't mean that the game is absolutely perfect. There's obviously some problems here and there that are worth pointing out. Firstly, I want to talk about the frame rate. It seems like a lot of people are experiencing problems when it comes to that. I did as well actually. The game would run at a higher frame rate than it should, which sped up the game, but alt-tabbing out of the game and then back in again always fixed it for me. There have been a lot of reports about the game just not running smoothly in general for a lot of people though, and I'm not sure if that's ever been fixed. Also, the frame rate is locked at 30 FPS, and even though I thought that that's absolutely enough for this kind of game, I'm sure that there are some people that will be turned off by this. Furthermore, some of the game's controls feel a bit awkward. You have a bow, for example, that allows you to teleport to the location your arrow lands in. You charge your shot by holding down the right trigger on the controller, and trying to hit a precise shot with anything other than full charge is very frustrating. It's already been patched, and I still think that it doesn't feel right yet. Lastly, I feel like the bosses are a bit inconsistent when it comes to how difficult they are. To me, it felt like bosses get easier once you're halfway through the game. Also, I thought that the final boss was absolutely easy to kill, and I beat him on my 3rd try. I honestly expected a bigger challenge there. The New Game Plus isn't really much of a challenge either, since you basically already know how to deal with most enemies. Now, Alex is a very dedicated developer though, and a lot of things I was initially going to complain about have already been fixed, and that doesn't just include bugs, but also game design decisions I just didn't agree with. Stuff like a much needed checkpoint after a frustrating area, complete removal of an unfair third phase during a boss fight, or a rework of the Spirit Bow ability. In addition to all that, he also communicates with his players. Going through the Steam forums, you can catch him replying to people that are offering suggestions or asking for changes or additions to the game, which I find very noble. I had a lot of fun with Unworthy. It's very challenging with nice combat and beautiful art. It's not 100% perfect, but thanks to Alex's updates, the game is already a lot better than it was at the initial release, which I have to commend him for. I didn't think I'd say this, but I think he succeeded in creating this 2D Dark Souls he was going for. You'll probably not like this if you don't like Dark Souls or very challenging Metroidvanias in general, but if you do and actually like the art style, oh boy, are you in for a treat. Just keep in mind that some people are dealing with frame rate problems, but if worse comes to worst, the Steam refund policy should have you covered. So, should you play Unworthy? Yes.